She sat on the edge of the crowded market square, her knees pulled close to her chest, trying to hide from the endless stares. Her clothes were torn, her skin caked with layers of dirt, and her smell carried in the hot air like a warning. People passing by covered their noses, whispering in disgust. Traders looked at her with anger, as if her presence alone would drive customers away. Children pointed and laughed, then ran when she turned her head. She had gotten used to it. No one wanted to come near her, not even by accident. Her stomach growled with sharp pain, but the food stalls were impossible to reach. Each time she moved closer, someone pushed her away. "Get lost, filthy thing," a vendor shouted, lifting a stick. She staggered back, pressing her empty hands to her chest. She had once tried to beg, but begging only brought stones, insults, and kicks. The market was full of color, sound, and life, but for her, it was a cage of shame. That morning had been worse than usual. She had tried to drink from a small fountain, but guards stopped her. They pushed her down in front of everyone, laughing as the crowd stared. The water spilled across the stones, mixing with the dirt on her face. She curled in on herself, too afraid to fight back. The smell of sweat, rot, and dust rose from her body, stronger now that the sun beat down on her. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never wake again, but she couldn't. Her body clung to life even when her heart wanted to let go. Every breath hurt, every step felt heavy. She had no one, no family, no friends, no one to say her name. She had become less than a person, just an unwanted shadow among the busy crowd. A group of young men noticed her from across the square. They sneered, covering their noses dramatically. One picked up a rotten fruit and tossed it at her. It hit her shoulder, sneeze, the smell mixing with her own. The others laughed loudly, clapping each other on the back. She lowered her head, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Still, her body trembled. She was too weak to fight, too weak to even stand tall. The guards did not stop them. They never did. Sometimes it felt as if everyone in the city had agreed she did not belong, that she was cursed, that she should suffer. She dragged herself toward a quiet corner, hidden between two tall crates, where shadows gave her a little cover. Her throat burned, so dry she could barely swallow. She found a broken cup on the ground and lifted it to catch drops of dirty rainwater that dripped from a pipe above. She sipped slowly, ignoring the taste of rust. Her hands shook, but this was all she had. And that was when she noticed him. He stood a little distance away, watching her. A man. Different from the others. He was human, not one of her kind. His clothes were simple but clean, his boots worn from travel. His eyes did not hold disgust nor fear. They were steady, curious, almost soft. She froze, clutching the broken cup to her chest, ready for the insult that always came, ready for the mocking laughter. But he said nothing. He didn't throw stones or shout. He only watched. The silence between them felt heavier than the noise of the market. Her heart beat faster. Why was he staring? Did he plan to chase her too? Did he pity her? She hated pity even more than cruelty. At least cruelty was honest. The human took one step closer. Her whole body stiffened. She tried to shrink back into the shadow of the crates, but there was no escape. His gaze did not leave her, and that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. The smell around her was sharp, sour, impossible to ignore. Surely he would turn away any second now. Surely he would cover his nose and leave, like everyone else. But he didn't. Instead, he crouched down so he wasn't towering over her. The crowd moved around them, busy and loud, but it was as if the world had narrowed down to only the two of them. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small flask of clear water. Slowly, carefully, he set it down on the ground between them, just close enough for her to see, just far enough that she could choose to take it. Her mouth went dry, thirst screaming inside her, but she did not move. It had to be a trick. No one gave her anything. No one ever showed kindness. His voice was low, calm. "It's for you." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but her fear held her in place. She waited for the laughter, for the cruelty that always followed such moments. But he said nothing else. He only stood, gave her one last glance, and stepped back into the flow of the market. Her hand shook as she reached for the flask. The water inside shone in the sunlight. She lifted it to her lips, and tears blurred her vision. It was clean, real, pure. She drank, the cool liquid sliding down her throat, and for the first time in years she felt alive. But more than the water, it was his eyes that stayed with her. Eyes that did not turn away, eyes that did not judge. She didn't know it yet, but her life had already begun to change. She did not expect to see him again, yet when the next day came and the market filled with noise and smoke, there he was. He walked with a steady pace, not hurried like the others, not sneering, not avoiding her. She froze the moment their eyes met. The flask he had given her was still clutched close to her chest, empty now, but more precious than anything she owned. She told herself to look away, to act invisible, but her body betrayed her. Her gaze locked on his as he came closer. She tensed, ready to run. Kindness often carried hidden hooks, and she had learned long ago that nothing came free. He stopped only a few steps away, lowering himself again so he wasn't towering over her. His hands were open, showing he carried nothing threatening. From his pack he pulled a small piece of bread, rough and plain but warm, and broke it in half. He held one piece out toward her. Her nose caught the smell before her brain did. Fresh, baked, soft, so different from the rotten scraps she usually stole. Her stomach clenched painfully, yet still she didn't reach for it. She had been baited before. Once she had been promised food, only to be dragged into the mud by laughing hands. "Eat," he said simply. His voice was not sharp or mocking, just steady like the sound of rain. Her eyes darted from his face to the bread, then back. She waited for the trap, for the cruel joke, but none came. The crowd rushed past them, busy with trade and chatter, but no one seemed to notice him kneeling in front of her. No one cared that he spoke to her like she was human. Hesitantly, she reached out, her dirty fingers brushing against his clean hand as she took the bread. Her heart pounded as if she had just stolen from a guard. She pulled back quickly, holding the piece tight against her chest, half expecting him to snatch it away. But he didn't. He only took up a bite of his own half and chewed slowly, watching her with calm patience. The first bite nearly broke her. The taste was simple, but to her it was a feast. Warmth spread through her chest as tears filled her eyes. She turned away so he wouldn't see them. For the first time in so long, her hunger eased, even if only a little. "Why?" she asked in a hoarse whisper, the word breaking from her throat without permission. He tilted his head slightly, as if the question confused him. "Because you're starving," he replied. Simple words, yet they felt heavier than stone. No one had ever answered her cries with something so plain, so true. People always called her cursed, disgusting, worthless. Never starving, never alive. She swallowed the last bite quickly, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She wanted to say thank you, but the words stuck. Gratitude was dangerous. It tied her to someone, made her vulnerable. She had survived this long by staying unseen, untied, unwanted. He stood slowly, but before turning away, he placed another small flask of water on the ground. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said, his tone not asking, not demanding, just telling. Her breath caught. She stared at him as he disappeared into the crowd. A storm of emotions battled inside her. Fear, suspicion, anger, but also a small flicker of something she thought had died long ago. Hope. That night she sat awake in her corner, the bread gone, the flask nearly empty, her mind racing. Why would a human care for her? What did he see that others did not? Maybe tomorrow he would not return. Maybe tomorrow it would all end as a cruel trick. But deep down, hidden under years of pain, a small part of her wanted him to keep his word. The next sunrise came too fast, and her eyes searched the busy square. For hours she waited, her heart pounding each time someone walked past. And then, through the shifting crowd, she saw him again. He was carrying something larger this time, something wrapped in cloth. Fear returned, stronger than before, but her legs would not let her run. She stayed frozen as he approached. He placed the bundle gently on the ground before her and stepped back. "Come with me," he said quietly, his voice almost lost in the noise of the market. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Go with him? To where? Why? Every warning she had ever taught herself screamed inside her head, yet her eyes fell on the bundle. From the folds of cloth steam rose, the smell of cooked food, rich and real, not scraps. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe. But trust had always been the start of her suffering. Her silence stretched between them, heavy as stone. He did not push, did not threaten. He only waited, as if her choice mattered. And for the first time in her life, she wondered what it would feel like to say yes. The small room was dim, lit only by a single lamp that flickered against the metal walls. She stood in the doorway, trembling, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. It was quiet here, too quiet compared to the roar of the market. She could hear the drip of water in the next room, steady and clean, and her body tensed at the sound. Water in her life had always been scarce, dirty, or thrown at her like a weapon. She hugged her arms around herself, unsure if she had made a mistake by following him. The man set a small bundle of soap and cloth on a low table. He did not move toward her. Instead, he kept his distance, as if he understood how close she was to running. "There," he said softly, pointing toward the narrow door where the dripping sound came from. "You can wash." Her chest tightened. The word felt strange, unreal. Wash. The crowd had mocked her smell every day. Guards had shoved her away as if she carried disease. But no one had ever given her this choice. She wanted to believe, but suspicion kept her feet locked to the floor. What if this was just another cruel trick? What if the water was boiling or poisoned or meant to humiliate her further? He said nothing more, only pulled out a chair and sat down, turning his face slightly away to give her space. His calm made her more uneasy than anger ever did. Anger she knew how to fight. This patience, this silence, she didn't understand. Finally, she shuffled toward the narrow door, her breath shaking with each step. Inside was a small basin, steam rising from it, with clear water that glistened in the light. Her reflection stared back at her, sunken eyes, tangled hair, dirt etched into every line of her skin. The stench clung to her like a second skin, heavier than the rags she wore. She gripped the edge of the basin, her hands trembling so hard the water rippled. She glanced back. He had not moved from his chair. He was waiting, but not watching. Her throat ached as she dipped her fingers into the water. It was warm, not scalding, not icy, just warm. The touch made her heart pound harder. Slowly, she lifted her hand and let the drops run down her arm, carving pale lines through the filth. The first tear fell before she realized she was crying. She pulled off her rags, ashamed of her body, her scars, the layers of filth that clung to her. Still, she lowered herself into the basin, and for the first time in her life, water embraced her like safety instead of punishment. The dirt slid from her skin in dark streams, swirling into the basin until the water turned cloudy. She scrubbed with the soap, the smell sharp but clean, unlike anything she had ever known. Her hair loosened, tangles falling apart beneath her fingers. The rags on the floor no longer seemed like clothing, but like a prison she had finally escaped. Her mind whispered that this couldn't be real, that any moment he would burst through the door, laughing, pointing, mocking her for thinking she deserved this. Yet the door never opened. He remained outside, silent, patient. Minutes turned into something longer, something she had no word for. Each time she poured water over her head, she felt lighter. Her skin breathed again, the stench fading until she could barely recognize it. She touched her arms, her face, her hair, almost in disbelief. The girl in the reflection was still broken, still thin, but she no longer looked like the outcast the market had spat on. She looked alive. When she finally stepped out, her body wrapped in the clean cloth he had left, she moved slowly, as if afraid the feeling would vanish if she walked too fast. Her hair dripped down her shoulders, her skin glowing with a softness she had never known. He looked up from his chair. His eyes widened slightly, not with pity, not with disgust, but with something else. Recognition, as if he was seeing the person she had always been beneath the dirt. She froze, holding the cloth tighter, unsure what to do under the weight of his gaze. "You look different," he said quietly, almost to himself. Her throat closed around words she could not form. She wanted to ask him why he cared, why he had given her this, why he hadn't turned away like the rest. Instead, she lowered her eyes, afraid of what she might see in his face if she looked too long. But deep inside, where her fear could not reach, a fragile seed of something began to grow. Something she had never allowed herself before, hope that maybe, just maybe, she was worth saving. The small house smelled of wood and fire instead of rot and dust. She sat on the edge of a narrow bed, her fingers twisting the cloth around her shoulders, unable to relax. The floor was swept clean, the shelves filled with simple tools and jars, the air still carrying faint traces of soap and smoke. Every part of it felt too pure for her to touch. She was certain that if she stayed too long, her presence would stain the walls, drive away the warmth, and turn this place into another corner of rejection. The man busied himself at the table, preparing food. He did not ask questions, did not demand thanks, only worked with steady hands, as though bringing a stranger into his home was nothing unusual. But she felt the weight of it. Never had anyone offered her shelter. Never had she been allowed to step across a threshold without being pushed out again. Through the window, whispers carried. Neighbors had seen her enter. They lingered outside, muttering in low voices. Why would he bring her here? He'll regret it. She's nothing but trouble. Their words slithered through the cracks of the door, wrapping around her chest like chains. She pulled her knees closer, her breath sharp and fast. She knew how it would end. He would hear them, listen to them, and send her away before nightfall. He placed a bowl of soup on the table, then looked at her with calm eyes. Eat, he said, just as simply as before. Her body stayed frozen. They'll hate you, she whispered, her voice raw, trembling, because of me. His jaw tightened, but not with hesitation. He set another bowl for himself and sat across from her. Let them hate, he said. His voice was quiet, yet firm, like stone beneath the surface of water. Her throat ached. No one had ever chosen her over the voices of the crowd. She lowered her gaze to the steaming bowl, the smell rich and heavy. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but it wasn't the food that made her hands shake. It was the terrifying thought that he meant what he said. When she finally lifted the spoon, her hands trembled so badly some spilled back into the bowl. He didn't laugh. He didn't scold. He only ate his own portion, slow and steady, as if to show her she could take her time. Each sip filled her chest with warmth until tears slid down her cheeks without warning. She turned her face away, wiping them quickly, ashamed. You don't have to hide that, he said softly. Her breath caught. His words slipped into the cracks of her defenses like light through broken shutters. She wanted to tell him he was a fool, that she was not worth the trouble, that the world had already decided her value. But when she looked up, his gaze held no doubt, no hesitation, only quiet certainty. The voices outside grew louder, footsteps stopping near the door. Someone knocked sharply once, twice. Human, a voice called. You can't keep her. She doesn't belong here. Her heart dropped. She gripped the edge of the bed, waiting for him to answer, waiting for the moment he would open the door and push her out into the night like everyone else had. Instead, he stood and walked to the door. He opened it just wide enough to face the neighbors gathered outside. His words were simple, steady, the same as always. She stays with me. The murmurs turned into gasps. Some spat on the ground, others shook their heads, but none dared step across the threshold. The door closed again, shutting them out, leaving the house quiet once more. She stared at him, unable to speak. He moved back to his chair, lifted his spoon, and continued eating as though nothing had happened. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her not in secret, not in shame, but openly in front of those who despised her. The soup in her hands felt heavier than gold. She lowered her head, silent tears dripping into the bowl, because she knew this place was no longer just his home. Somehow it had become hers too. The days that followed felt like walking on a rope stretched over fire. She tried to stay quiet in the small house, moving like a shadow, afraid of drawing attention. But the world outside did not forget. Whispers followed whenever she stepped beyond the door. Traders turned their backs, neighbors crossed the street, and children mocked her from a distance. The smell was gone, washed away by soap and warm water, but the memory of it clung to her reputation like a curse. People did not care if she was clean now. They only remembered what she had been. One afternoon, while she fetched water from the well, a stone struck the ground near her feet. She froze. Another stone flew past her ear. Laughter followed. A group of boys stood at the corner, grinning with cruelty. The human keeps garbage now, one jeered. Maybe he likes the stink. They laughed harder, throwing more stones until she dropped the bucket and stumbled back. Before she could retreat into the house, he was there. The man stepped between her and the boys, his face like iron. Enough, he said, his voice deep, steady. The laughter died in their throats. They muttered curses but backed away, unsettled by the way his gaze did not waver. He did not shout, did not strike them, yet his presence was enough to scatter them into the alleys. She stood trembling behind him, shame and guilt boiling inside. You should not have done that, she whispered once they were alone. They will come back worse, because of me. He turned toward her, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp. "Then let them. You are not leaving." The words cut through her like a blade, both painful and comforting. She wanted to argue, to scream that he was throwing his life away, but the strength to fight him crumbled. For the first time, someone had decided her worth for himself instead of letting the world decide it for him. But the trouble did not end with stones. Days later, officials came knocking. Their uniforms were polished, their boots heavy, and their eyes full of disdain. They spoke with authority, demanding explanations. "This creature is not registered. She is not welcome. You will hand her over." Her blood went cold. She hid behind the doorframe, her body shaking, certain this was the end. But the man stood tall in the doorway, meeting their threats with silence. "She's under my roof," he said, "and she's not going anywhere." The officials sneered. "Do not test us, human. She is a burden. She is filth. We'll take her, and you'll be spared punishment." His answer was firm, without hesitation. "She is not filth. She is mine to protect." The words slammed into her chest, leaving her breathless. No one had ever claimed her in any way that wasn't cruel or mocking. To hear it spoken with defiance as a shield instead of a chain made her heart pound in confusion. The officials left with threats of fines and punishments, promising they would return. When the door shut, silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of her uneven breathing. "You are foolish," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They will ruin you." He looked at her then, not with anger, not with regret, but with the same calm that had carried him since the day they met. "Maybe," he said softly, "but some things are worth ruin." Her knees gave out, and she sank onto the floor. Tears spilled down her face, hot and heavy, but this time she did not turn away from him. For the first time, she let him see them. The world outside still hated her, still wanted her gone, but in this house, one man's choice had become louder than all their voices. The weeks unfolded like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Each morning, sunlight spilled across the small wooden floor, and for the first time in her life, she rose without fear of being chased away. She learned the rhythm of the house, the soft creak of the chair when he sat down, the way the fire snapped in the hearth, the sound of boots scraping against the ground when he returned from work. Slowly, the weight on her chest began to loosen, though she never forgot the eyes of the world outside, always watching, always waiting for her to fail. She tried to repay him in small ways. She swept the floor, though her hands shook. She washed the bowls, though her fingers were clumsy. She cooked once, burning the pot so badly she thought he would throw her out, but instead he only laughed gently and ate the charred bread anyway. Each mistake chipped away at her fear. Each smile he gave reminded her that this place was not just his home anymore. It was becoming hers. The neighbors noticed. Some mocked, some whispered, but a few began to watch with curiosity. When she walked through the market now, cleaner, stronger, their stares shifted. No longer only disgust, there was something else hidden beneath, something like doubt. She was no longer the filthy outcast crouched by the crates. She stood straighter now, her hair brushed, her eyes clearer. People could not deny the change, even if they despised it. One evening, while she hung washed cloth outside, a woman passing by stopped. Her lips curled into a sneer, but her eyes betrayed unease. "Strange," the woman muttered. "How different you look when a human bothers to keep you alive." The words stung, but this time she did not shrink. She met the woman's eyes and held them, and it was the passerby who looked away first. Her heart beat wildly after, not with fear, but with a strange new fire. She was no longer invisible. At night, she sat by the fire across from him, learning little pieces of his world. He spoke of stars, of faraway lands, of machines that hummed like living things. She listened in silence, every word painting colors she had never seen. Sometimes he asked her about her past, but she only shook her head. The memories were wounds she was not ready to show. He did not press. His patience was its own kind of healing. But peace never lasts. Strange figures began to appear at the edges of the street, cloaked, silent, always watching. The first time she noticed them, she thought it was her imagination, but when she told him, his face grew serious. He said nothing, only checked the locks on the door twice that night. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed she had royal blood hidden under the dirt. Others whispered that she carried a sickness that officials wanted silenced. She didn't know what was true, only that danger was tightening around her like a noose. One evening, as she carried water inside, she felt eyes on her. Turning, she caught a glimpse of a figure slipping into the shadows. Her chest froze. She hurried inside, spilling some water across the floor. He took the bucket from her trembling hands, his jaw set. "They're coming closer," she whispered. He nodded once. "Then we'll be ready." She wanted to ask why he risked himself, why he stood between her and the world when it would be easier to give her up. But when she looked at him, the words died. His expression held no doubt, no fear, only a steady resolve she could not understand. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart torn between terror and something warmer, something she had never dared to feel. For years, she had believed her life was worth nothing more than scraps and dirt. But in his house, in his eyes, she had begun to see herself differently. And for the first time, she wondered if the world was about to find out what he had already seen. The pounding on the door came before dawn, sharp and unrelenting. She jolted awake, her heart thundering in her chest. Shadows flickered across the windows, the glow of torches seeping through the cracks. Voices shouted outside, harsh and commanding, demanding her surrender. She sat frozen on the bed, clutching the blanket like a shield, knowing this moment had finally come. He was already on his feet, his boots hitting the floor with purpose. He didn't look panicked. He looked ready, as if he'd been waiting for this. She grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. "They'll kill you if you fight. Let them take me." He turned to her, his eyes steady even in the half-light. "No." The door shook under the force of fists and boots. Splinters cracked, the sound of iron tools prying at the wood. She felt her throat close, the old fear wrapping around her like chains. She wanted to hide, to curl back into the girl who lived in shadows, but something inside refused. Not now. Not after everything he had done for her. The door burst open. Armed guards spilled into the room, their armor clattering, their eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. "Stand aside, human," one barked. "She is not yours to keep." He stepped in front of her, his shoulders squared, his body a wall between her and the intruders. "She's not leaving." The guards laughed, their voices dripping with scorn. "You think you can defy the order? For her?" They lunged forward, but he met them with fists of iron, his movements sharp, desperate, yet unyielding. The clash of steel and flesh filled the room. He fought not like a soldier, but like a man who had something worth dying for. She watched, trembling, every instinct screaming to run, to vanish, to let him sacrifice himself. But another voice rose inside her, one she barely recognized, strong, furious, alive. She grabbed the broken leg of a chair, rushing forward with a cry that split her throat. The first guard she struck staggered back, shocked at her defiance. Together, they fought, not as savior and outcast, but as two lives bound by something greater. Every blow she landed tore away the chains of her past. Every breath beside him felt like freedom. The crowd outside pressed forward, drawn by the noise. Neighbors who had once spat at her now stared, their whispers cut short as they saw the human shielding her, refusing to bend. Blood streaked his face, sweat poured down his brow, but his stance never wavered. A final guard stumbled back, clutching his side. The others hesitated, unsure. The man's voice rang out, low but clear, carrying beyond the walls. "She stays with me. No law, no curse, no voice will change that." The silence that followed was heavier than the battle. The crowd shifted uneasily, some glaring, some lowering their eyes. For the first time, no one stepped forward. She fell to her knees, tears streaming, her body shaking from exhaustion and fear. He turned, kneeling beside her, his hand gentle as it brushed her hair from her face. "It's over," he whispered. Her voice broke, raw and trembling. "You gave me a home. Now I will never leave you." In that moment, she was no longer the girl the world had called filth. She was no longer the shadow in the market. She was his, and he was hers. Bound not by pity, but by a choice made in defiance of everyone who had tried to tear them apart. And outside, the crowd watched in silence, realizing the human had seen what they had all been too blind to notice: her worth.